Welcome to the Powered by Purpose panel. My name's Lauren Stovall, and I lead nonprofit programs for AWS, one of which is the AWS Imagine Grant Program. Today I'm joined by three nonprofit leaders and Imagine Grant winners to discuss how they crafted their technology visions and took bold steps for change. Hope, Christy, Catherine, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So, of course, we're going to start with introductions. Would love for each of you to share a little bit more about yourselves and your organizations, and perhaps maybe also some of what our audience might not know about the challenges and opportunities in the mission spaces that you work in. Hope, we'll start with you.
Great, thanks. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for what you all are doing. My name is Hope Wall, and I am CEO of breastcancer.org. And I've been heading up this organization almost since its inception, almost 20 years ago, when the digital space was very, very different. Breastcancer.org's mission is to help people make sense of the complex medical information and personal information about breast health and breast cancer so they can make the best decisions for their lives. We are here to ensure that people have access to all of the expert guidance and the vast amount of breast cancer information, treatment, and research that's available. So our content is very deep, it's very multi-layered, which means that behind the scenes, breastcancer.org has to work really hard to ensure that what we deliver is very tailored to each person's individual needs, really addresses their situation around their diagnosis, their treatment, whatever it is that has brought them to us. So as we do that, we've been using AWS Personalize to really learn more about what is their behavior as they're moving around the website. How can we figure out what they need so that we then can give them more content that is relevant to what they're looking for. So for instance, let's say a young woman comes, she's looking for information about fertility preservation before she starts chemotherapy. We see that, and that means we know that it would be useful to recommend to her content about breastfeeding after she's done her treatment. So things like that are critically important. People don't always know what to ask. We want to get in front of that and help them and give them the information they need. And then our next step is to really bring this personalization process further and make sure that we base it on the clinical data that we can extract from everybody's medical records, their actual health records, rather than what they give us now, which is manually input from their understanding of their situation.
Thank you, Hope. And yeah, I think it's amazing the ability to think about how to make that journey from diagnosis to treatment less daunting, more guided, and have that support to really know they're on the right path. So that's fantastic. And I look forward to diving into that a little bit more a little bit later. So great. Christy, let's hear from you.
Thanks so much. So happy to be here with these terrific panelists. Yay, women leading these nonprofits. So I'm Christy Kaufman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the CODA Support Foundation. We are entering into our 10th year. And we really founded the organization. I co-founded it with General Salisbury, who's a Vietnam veteran. I'm a post 9/11 Army wife. And we recognize that the biggest challenge in the space isn't as much a lack of resources, as Hope was pointing out, but it was this fragmentation and disjointed effort, right? So if you look at some of the negative outcomes in the military veteran space, suicide is really a challenge. We have 20 veterans a day that are taking their own lives. And it hasn't been for a lack of effort between government resources and nonprofit resources. It's really been more about that fragmentation. And so we took on the mission to integrate effort. We do that with people, and we do that with technology. We have a case management team that works really closely with troops, veterans, and families across the country, identify, assess, and prioritize their multiple needs, and then peel back that onion to discover what are all the different factors that are going into this crisis state. And what we find is that there's typically 4 to 6 very unique needs that need to be addressed. And no one organization does that, not even the VA, as big as it is. So our coordinators go out into the sea of organizations and agencies and start pulling to cover down on the entire family. So as we were doing that work, we recognized it was taking our folks sometimes half their week just to identify the resources because we're a national organization. And we knew we couldn't scale that. And we knew there needed to be a technology portion to the solution. And that's what really drove the development of Patriot Link, which is a technology platform that we host on AWS. And it's really meant to be that one-stop shop to make sure that people can get exactly what they need when they need it. And then on the back end of the platform, we're aggregating and anonymizing all of this data, which allows us to present a data set that says, hey, we have a trend in need in this particular area right now, and we need to address it. As an example, in the beginning of COVID, we saw a huge spike in searches around food, not something we had seen before. We were able quickly to react to that, upload all the food pantries, tag them in a geographical location, and get them in there. So I think that what you heard Hope say, and what you'll probably hear Catherine say, is it's this intersection between people and technology. Technology isn't the only solution, but it facilitates solutions for all of us.
Thank you, Christy. And yeah, I think that likely, Catherine, you'll share this as well, is that there's this sense of fragmentation, hard to navigate information and data, making, everything easily surfaceable, easy to find, and easy to really take advantage of. And all the benefits that your organizations provide, really making sure that those are front and center is going to be a theme, I think, where technology is really key to helping, and who is the people, right? That's really kind of the core of this, and the technology is just a path to it. So, Catherine, yeah, tell us a little bit more.
No, it's just I feel so inspired by both Hope and Christy. I think that lovely description of that intersection and the human face in all these organisations, there are human beings and a human face to the challenges that we all face. So my organisation, I'm the CEO of Creative Commons, and our purpose is really through our legal tools to free up knowledge and culture across the world. And 2020, who would have thought we'd all be locked down, where we'd be thinking about everything online, and the work we do with open education to make sure that open education tools are available for teachers and students, our work to make sure that galleries, libraries, archives and museums are open and accessible. And we did an amazing piece of work with the Smithsonian to ensure that content could be online, and how important was that? So there's something about Creative Commons. We began 20 years ago, and never did we think that we'd be freeing over 2 billion pieces of content across the world to expand this public domain, this public commons that belongs to us all. So we are deeply embedded in technology, but equally it's about that human creativity that allows the public commons to be able to be accessible to us all. And I think this is something that we are certainly so grateful to AWS to assist us in that mission of expanding the public domain and the commons.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Working backwards is a key piece of the Amazon innovation methodology. It's certainly a critical way that you go about your work every day. And that means working backwards from the needs of the communities, of the individuals, of the families that your organizations are working to support. And so the question really is, what was that inflection point, that moment where you all realized something needed to be done differently? When did technology enter in? And maybe go a little bit deeper into what the solution looks like, not just the technology piece. What's the holistic kind of approach that you are all taking? And Hope, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. It's a wonderful question, and it's one that I think gives us all the opportunity to pause and look at the trajectory of how we've gotten to where we are. I've had the honor of leading this organization for so many years that I've really seen the change over time. And in so many arenas, the digital world has changed, consumer behavior has changed, delivery of cancer treatments and the treatments themselves have changed, and people's attitudes about sharing their information online about their situation and their data has changed. So what we experienced in the working backwards question is that we have, along with having all of this deep content, we have a very robust, active online community where people are sharing with each other information about what's going on in their lives and helping each other in very, very active ways. And we started to see that they were actually starting to create signatures, digital signatures, where they were sharing information about their disease, information which breast, what is the treatment, what's the surgery. They were trying to self-identify in a way so that they could connect with each other and others like them, so that they could both get the information they needed and help others like them. So we're always keeping a finger on the pulse, like my colleagues are, with what we see the needs being. And we recognize that they really wanted to have a way of sort of systematizing a profile. So we then created a technology where we invited them to manually input information, and we really sort of codified it so that we would have something that would be more systematic about how they would share that. And so based on that, we saw a lot of people were keen to participate in that. We then started to match all of that up to our content so we could offer them content that was relevant to their situation. And again, as there was uptake on that, and technology is marching forward, we said, there's more we can do. And we started to see, okay, there are things we can do around personalization that will take this even further. So we're looking over time, as we can understand more about each person's behavior, to take this a step further, because their self-recall and understanding of their diagnosis is not always accurate, no fault of theirs. It's wildly complicated. I mean, who is expected to become an expert in cancer overnight? It's a terribly difficult situation. So we want to be able to extract that data, which they will then build their profile on, and we will then build our interactions to try to help them more. We want to extract that from their actual medical record. And technology is getting to a place where we can do that, and that will be game changing, so that we reduce the burden on them of having to figure out, what do I say about my pathology report? Do I understand the grade of my cancer, the stage, the treatment, all of these things? So we pull forward the accurate information, and then we can serve them increasingly personalized information that's relevant to them, that helps connect them with others like them, and ultimately really improves their health outcomes. So it's a super exciting time.
Yeah, I think there were two inflection points. One was my personal experience as an Army wife at Fort Bragg from '06 to '08 during the surge, and what I experienced, but more importantly, what the families in our unit experienced, and being really frustrated with the Army's more kind of traditional approach to mental health and family support. And it was always really more about readiness and retention. I mean, the DoD is not a social service agency, right? Their focus is on fighting and winning wars, which is exactly where it is supposed to be. But our point was like, look, if you don't give us or get us the support that we need, it will impact people's ability to be good at their jobs. And so for me, that led to trying to change things at the unit level, which, as just a little wife isn't easy to do. And I was really talking about systemic things that needed to be changed. I wasn't talking about potholes in the road or whatever. So, that experience is what really led me to when we moved up to the DC area, write an op-ed for the Washington Post. And that was enough to get me a seat at the table, at the table with the president and Congress and the Secretary of the Army. And I knew enough to know I didn't know enough. So I put my head down to really understand what is the problem? Why aren't we seeing better outcomes other than the obvious that we were deploying every year, and that operational tempo is difficult to sustain. And then when I met General Salisbury and we came together to say, okay, we need to be the integrator. And as I mentioned, our case managers, as they started to do this really in-depth, intensive, personalized work, could not keep up with the ability to identify resources by just using Google, right? So it was really important that we had a tool that made it easy to deliver, as Hope has described, those customized types of programs and services that can be wrapped around that family. So I think that experience, when we saw that about 5-6 years ago, is what drove us to develop Patriot Link. And then recently, through the pandemic, as we've seen, it's been interesting because our vision is to get this upstream into the transition process, right? It's a free platform that we are offering to the government for free for people to use as they transition out of the military, because there is no technology platform that supports transition right now, which is kind of crazy to say in 2021, particularly after a pandemic. So the model of the transition program that they had is really in-person classes. You're putting paper in people's hands. That wasn't really all that relevant before the pandemic, and now it's impossible. And so we want to provide this technology platform that says, okay, people are just coming at you with all kinds of information as you're getting out. You're going to retain like 1/10 of it. If you can have this on your phone, know that it's there, that if you need something, whether it is something around transportation, mental health, benefits, family, then it's there, that you don't have to, as Hope said, rely on pieces of paper or your own memory, but you can actually have it in your fingertips. And so that's our vision, is getting this into the hands of all that would benefit. And for us, that's basically the 18 million veterans in the country. And we can't forget about the family members. People don't really understand how much people are impacted by war and what you sometimes come home with. So we're trying to be super inclusive and engaging family members as well, to make sure that they can access the platform.
Catherine, let's hear a little bit more about Creative Commons. What was your inflection point?
I think there's several. I think that when we're trying to build a commons of knowledge and culture, and what we do is so hidden. So for example, Wikipedia couldn't function if it wasn't for our licenses, allowing things to be open and free to use, and so we need stability and reliability in terms of how we apply our technology. And so I think that's something to really reflect on, because we're part of this kind of hidden infrastructure that allows so much to happen, but yet so few people really understand that thinking backwards is something where we kind of reflect upon that there's more to do in building that active commons of knowledge and culture that we all benefit from. And so I think that we really kind of value, and I think Christy touches upon some of that, about the ability, the enabling, that technology is an enabler. And although technology has been part of Creative Commons journey since we started 20 years ago, it's the enabling factor that we allow creators to have the ability to choose how they want their artistic work, or piece of research that a research has done, whether that's how you use that, and the ability to make that available, and attribution to that action of freeing that knowledge and culture for us all to benefit from. And we talked about the pandemic. At this moment, we at Creative Commons, we were part of a Open COVID pledge, which freed up all this IP so people could use that, and bought a time to be able to do that under our licenses. So it's that hidden infrastructure piece that is able to have that reliability and stability that we have from the work that we've done with you. So it's really quite special.
You're all talking about change, and within that, and in all cases, but in the nonprofit world, there's the sense that with change comes with a certain amount of risk, or navigating that risk. Can each of you talk a little bit about how you understood, or what the risks might be, how you navigated it to get to the opportunity, and really what that looked like for you to get that feeling of comfort that you were on the right track? And Hope, of course, we'll start with you.
Well, I think from the beginning, really from the very beginning, breastcancer.org was taking a lot of risk. So when I met our physician founder and chief medical officer, Dr. Weiss, she was recognizing that patients needed much more time and much more information than they were getting with their healthcare team. That was 20 plus years ago. And the internet was way different back then, but she had the vision to say, okay, well, this thing, whatever it is, this thing is going to be able to help. And that was bold. I mean, that was a time when you'd go online, you had no idea. I mean, you still sometimes don't, but where are you? And is this credible or not? And are physicians going to trust this? Are patients going to trust this? So from the beginning, and I think this has been a key piece of breastcancer.org's culture, it was a risky endeavor. And I think what we have been really fortunate with has been that we have taken these risks in a very smart way. And we have surrounded ourselves with staff and with board and with partners who really understand that intersection of being able to be bold and being really, really careful. Um, so every step along the way, I mean, I look at my own journey with this organization. Each year, there's a whole new set of risks. I mean, pandemic aside, there is always something new. Technology is changing. Uh, Disease treatment is changing. Diagnosis is changing. So there's always something more we need to do. So we are always stretching, and we're always trying to look further ahead than even the needs that, as all my colleagues and I have been talking about, even the needs we hear and see from the space and from those we serve. We try to really look beyond that so that we are ready to really meet the challenges as they come. So I think what I would say about risk is we find ourselves needing to be increasingly bold as the world continues to change and take on more and more risk. And I think we just continue to surround ourselves with people who are able to really approach it with the rigor and the carefulness that it requires.
For me, I think that I've always just in my world, in my life, have leaned pretty far forward in trying to figure out what the solutions were. But it has to me, the risk has to be worth the reward, and it has to be smart, right? So, okay, great. You write an op-ed for the Washington Post, you make a statement, and then what? I didn't feel comfortable just leaving that out there saying, okay, here's a problem, here's some ideas. I wanted to actually do something about it, right? And that's what was the genesis of the development of Code of Support. And then again, when we saw that there was literally a risk to the veterans that we were working with because we weren't able to find those resources efficiently and effectively, knowing that putting $2 million into a technology platform in a space that hasn't been super comfortable with technology traditionally was a risk. But as Hope said, we were looking forward. We don't have a problem in this country or in this world with lack of information. There's so much information, nobody knows what to do, right? So we knew the core problem needed a technology fix. So that didn't seem risky to me to make that decision. It was really more about, okay, if we do this, is it going to be something that others would adopt? And, one of the things that we see in the military veteran space is, number one, a stigma for reaching out for help, and then being very private and not wanting to offer a lot of information about themselves to get the help. And so we had to balance that too. The first iteration of Patriot Link was asking a lot of questions to try to collect some of those data points to make it easier to serve them through the platform. Well, we recognized that people were just stopping because they weren't comfortable. We hadn't built up a relationship with them that trusted us enough to give that information. And so we changed that user experience based on that. And I think the biggest risk is not taking risks. I mean, that's definitely one perspective. But I do think that particularly during this pandemic, you saw what happened to organizations that kind of took a knee. Well, let's wait to see how this all works out. Yeah, I don't think that a really forward-leaning nonprofit or any organization should ever do that. You got to figure it out. It might be the wrong step, but you got to step and then you readjust. And I think to me, that's one of the most fun things about working in a nonprofit is having the flexibility to do that and make our mistakes and then recalculate and go back and still take risks, but be smarter about the risk. So.
Well, the history of Creative Commons when it started 20 years ago was and that was 2001 was, it was to address the problem of failed sharing that at the moment at that time unless you had this all rights copyright, there was not a regime that you could share in a way that was, you had ownership really of what you wanted to do. And so by creating these licenses, by marrying the legal expertise and the technical expertise of the time to create these licenses to be able to share content online legally in a way that was you were empowered to do, was just such a counterintuitive and risky thing to do with the founders thinking about this. But, 20 years on, creating a global standard of sharing that the licenses are translated across, 50 countries now, that, who would have thought back 20 years ago that you would be kind of CC licenses would be this global standard of sharing content and knowledge legally in a way which empowers the creator, author to do so. And so, yeah, Christy's right, not taking a risk. I mean, if we hadn't been created 20 years ago, where would Wikipedia be today? And it's really interesting because 2021 was a year because so many organizations that are in open space are celebrating 20 years anniversaries this year, and there's something in the water back then that's created this movement, but absolutely necessary for sharing culture and knowledge online. Is so important. So I think that it's learning by doing, it's taking risks, it's reflecting on that, but also thinking about what is all our organisations' purpose in the world of today, and what are we going to do to make our organisations even stronger as we look towards the next 10, 20 years of purpose. So it's just there's a risk is really important, and how you deal with that is not for profit, and not for profits are so I think the word agile leadership is so important in the not for profit space, as well as that innovation and risk taking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think, a lot of what we're talking about here too, when we're talking about risk taking and the bold vision, there's the concept of leadership has come up. And you just mentioned that, Catherine. And maybe we'll actually start with you. What role, advice, thoughts you have for other leaders of nonprofits, CEOs or otherwise?
So I think what you're describing there is really about not just leadership, about how you lead change. And someone said to me recently that it's the million little conversations that you have that are able to try and make that change that you need to have. And I thought that's a lovely way to describe it. It is through both those million little conversations, and in those million little conversations, you being that active listener to be able to take that on board and to help and think through what that change is. And it sounds like when you talk about it, is one thing talking, it's another thing walking the walk to be able to achieve that. But I think all of us in these leadership positions, it's those conversations, the active listening, and then being able to take that through in terms of the change you want to see together. Because you can have all the strategies and all the ideas you want, but if you don't bring your organization and your stakeholders with you, you will not succeed in the way you would like to succeed. And then it's the ability of taking that strategy and taking that thinking, and also being, I say, about agile leadership, about also having that agility, as all strategies, are not set in stone, they're active documents, and you're looking at ways that, kind of emerging issues that you need to be part of and part of the picture too. So there's lots of food for thought, but my experience is million little conversations that really help.
As I was listening to the conversation that was just going on, I was thinking there is so much of it in leadership that is, as my colleague was describing, so much about making sure that we are actively listening. And that is with so many constituents, right? I mean, there is the audience that we serve. We need to listen to them, of course, and we've spoken to that a lot. I don't think we've talked as much about, our staff and making sure that everybody, I mean, people who are working in nonprofits usually are here because they bring something of real passion and commitment in ways that, from my experience, having been both in the for and nonprofit world, is different. It's not one better or worse, it's just different. And so really recognizing that and being able to give them a voice, just like we at breastcancer.org are really trying to make sure we're giving patients a voice. And then when we ask of our board to volunteer their time, which they do generously and graciously and with so much also passion and intelligence, to really make sure that everyone is heard is challenging, because people are saying a lot of different things. Decisions are made that don't always go along with what it is that they said, and so do they feel heard? So trying to, I think of it as conducting an orchestra so often. It's like just trying to make sure all of these instruments are, kind of tuned up with each other and following a little bit, along so that what comes out sounds like it's planned. I think uh, there is that sort of intangible, almost inarticulable piece of leadership, which is making sure that you really bring everyone together to be more powerful than any one constituency or any one person could be, and just building a real deep well of respect, um, and at the same time pushing people, encouraging people to push themselves. But there's a lot in leadership where if we're looking that far ahead, we're asking people to step out onto a rock where they're not sure if they're going to tumble into the stream or not, right? But we're going to help them get across the stream. So there's so many different components, and I think I've wandered in my answer, but I think the long and the short of it's complex, and it requires an enormous amount of attention, both to all of the details and to the very big picture, and that can be a hard balancing act.
Your leadership is so appreciated here, Christy. I know that you've got some really great thoughts on leading that change and bringing your organization along with you. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on it.
Making people part of the process is leadership. That's exactly what leadership is. And it's so funny because most people think in the military culture, it's like you get an order and you follow it. That is true. Doesn't matter if you don't like the order or not. And in the end, of course, those of us in leadership positions are going to have a final say. But unless you have trust, deep trust of the folks that you're working for, that you're working with, you can't lead. And so I think we all have different ways of developing that trust. But for me, it's like I am obviously willing to put myself out there, right? Like, and my team, I think, appreciates that I'm willing to take risks that could be uncomfortable for the greater good. And I think once you've established that kind of culture in your organization, you can do anything, right? So I think that leadership is about trust and authenticity, and making sure that your team knows that you are there for them.
So thank you so much, Christy. And I think we'll start with you for this last question as we close out, which is, you guys are leading your organizations in bold new directions. What's on the horizon? What's next? What do people need to know about where you're going at Coda Support Foundation?
Yeah, so I started by talking about the fact that we're trying to get the platform into the transition process. So that's something that is definitely on the horizon. But we didn't spend $2 million to build a platform for the 15 people in our organization. We built it to transform access to support and care. And we have a lesson on how to do this wrong. It's called the Vietnam generation. That generation came back and was not only, didn't get what they needed, they were actively looked down upon by a lot of the country. And so now there's such a huge opportunity for my generation of veteran families to connect, to have that life after service, and they want to continue to serve in their communities. And the opportunity to be a transformative part of that is so thrilling to me. I don't think any of us who start organizations, particularly not me, thought I would ever get to the point where we could make this kind of impact, which far outweighs our actual footprint. But that's what happens when you involve technology. It enables a transformative piece of being able to connect human beings that I don't think has been used very effectively in the space as of yet. And to be part of that, and for us, like, it's all about getting the word out, which is why I'm so excited to be talking today, because it doesn't matter how great our platforms are if nobody knows about them, right? And I think that's one of the things that we've seen in the past where there have been attempts to do something similar to this before, and it never really got off the ground. So I had no idea what a marketing expert I would have to become. And so for us, I think that we have the tool that can transform the way things work. It's just about getting the word out, and we're working on that every single day.
I know that you are, and we are thrilled to be a part of the journey, and we are excited to see where it goes. Know that you're going to do big things. Catherine, tell us a little bit about what comes next for Creative Commons.
So I think like what Christy is saying about, is about spreading the word, it's communication. So we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, and we have got our new strategy through, and so we're really thinking about what is ours to do in the world of today. So clearly we addressed a big challenge of field sharing with our licenses, and over the 20 years we've 2 billion licenses, 2 billion pieces of content are now open and accessible. And so we're now thinking about, we addressed the issue around open sharing, and now we're thinking about how can we do that better? What does better open sharing look like in the next 20 years? And so building on our strengths, thinking about what we can do, opening up more content, empowering more creators to be able to do that, I think is just, so enabling and exciting. And we're so proud that we are thinking about the next 20 years and achieving even more in terms of improving and expanding the public domain.
Thank you so much. It really is all just so exciting. Hope, we'll close it out with you. What's coming next for breastcancer.org?
Yeah, and it is wonderfully exciting to hear Christy and Catherine talk about this. So yeah, I think similarly, we look forward to, the next 10, 20 years, and we see enormous opportunity building on what we have already created. Technology is the tool that gets us there, and it has continued to change in such profound ways that the mission that was set out, 20 years ago, is still absolutely critical, if not more important. And the technology has changed in so many ways that we now have the opportunity to really expand the way we deliver on our mission so that we can really help the millions that we help in new and profound ways. I think one of the big changes when we look toward the future is we've talked a lot about giving patients voice, making sure they feel heard, and to be able to bring them the data they need to make the best decisions for their lives, and then to be able to help them see that if they share their data, be it their health data, the rest of their sort of data about their own experience, real world evidence, and what they're going through, if they are able to willing and able to share their data in that same way that my colleagues have talked about, we can bring really powerful change forward, and they can be a really important piece of research changes, of new findings, understanding things both about the disease and about mental health and the whole experience. So there are enormous opportunities of taking our mission forward into the research arena that I think will help patients in their everyday lives have better health outcomes, and also help give them a sense of power of being able to really participate in helping to change the face of research, so people in the future will not have to hopefully face the challenges in as difficult a way as they have had to.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And we're talking about sharing. And with that, thank you all for sharing your stories today and the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing your gifts and your vision with the world. Certainly, no doubt that the communities you support are endlessly benefiting from it. And there's even, more that you all are embarking on doing. And so thank you for the great work that you do. Thank you. And that extends, of course, to everyone in your organizations that powers that work. We hope that our audience out here today learned something from this, is inspired by this. I know I am. And hopefully there's some clear actions that you can take. And perhaps one that I think, we all talked about was start asking questions and listening of those in your organizations. What are their ideas? What are they seeing? What are they thinking? And start materializing that maybe into next steps. And so, thank you all so much. You can go learn more about these wonderful organizations and the great impact story videos that we've developed together. And so, again, thank you all.